I'm back with Michael Malice, author, host of the podcast. It's called You're Welcome with Michael Malice. We're talking about his book, The White Pill, A Tale of Good and Evil. By the way, you can follow Michael Malice on Twitter at Michael Malice, Malice, or his website, just michaelmalice.com. You were saying, Michael, in the last segment that our life, even though perhaps constricted by the left in certain ways, is not even remotely close to what life would be like in a totalitarian society. So here's my question to you. Some people might draw from that the lesson, well, there you go. We have nothing to worry about. Whatever the right is complaining about, we're hardly headed in that direction. So, but you seem to be saying, true, your life is secure now, but these dangers are ever present in any society, and they are maybe more present in our society now than in the past. Talk a little bit about why we should be concerned about this absolute form of evil, even though we are still pretty distant from it.
Well, I mean, we might be distant from it in certain contexts, but I do think that until very recently, I think many people in America are naive about the nature of evil. Right? They think it's going to be a guy with a wacky mustache banging a desk and screaming, and you could spot him from a million miles away. That's not the case. It's often that little bureaucrat who prevents you from seeing your mom in the hospital as she's dying, or prevents you from having a funeral. It's often someone who has got that little bit of power, this mediocrity, who somehow, because they toe the party line, are now in position to control your life. And this makes them feel good about themselves, and they're going to make sure they do what they want at no response to your values and your preferences. So I think one of the points of this is to show people just how evil can be. It's not just someone who's a crook taking money under the table or so on and so forth. But it's also important to show, and this is something I was kind of disturbed to see that conservatives especially don't talk about, they were defeated. The Soviet Union was defeated so fully, and the Cold War was won so completely that the country itself no longer exists. The threat of this nuclear mutually assured destruction, although now it's recently receding, was stopped. And this is largely thanks to people like President Reagan and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Now, you can't expect the New York Times to tell that story of how the conservatives massively helped liberate half the world. But I'm like, all right, if they're not going to tell it, it's my role to do so. So there is that aspect of hope and optimism, because this is a story in our lifetimes and the lifetimes of virtually everyone listening to this, where the good guys did win, and they did so relatively quickly, relatively easily, and despite being told this is impossible, the Soviet Union is not going anywhere, you're naive, you're stupid, and you're just provoking war, you have to accept we're going to have two superpowers in perpetuity. Even Star Trek had Chekhov, because even whatever 1,000 years in the future, it's going to be U.S. versus Soviet Union. And that turned out to be yet another one of the very many lies that people are told.
I mean, it's interesting that the critique of Reagan was made always in the name of realism. And it turned out that Reagan was the most realistic of them all. Your book actually ends on an encouraging note. You say the foes of liberty are many, they're powerful, people tell us they'll never give up. But you say under certain conditions, they do give up, and they will give up, and they have given up. And you go on to say that, it doesn't mean we're always going to win every fight, but we shouldn't consign ourselves to the losing side of history the way so many people thought we should. And you say that is the white pill. Explain this concept of a white pill. These days I hear people talk about being red pilled and so on. What's a white pill?
I'll just briefly, I'll answer that. But everyone listening to this, can you look at John Fetterman and say, I can't beat this guy? It's a wrap. He's going to win. I mean, yes, he won the Senate race, but in terms of the long term, it's an absurdity, right? So many Americans have been taught, and I think it's because conservatives for decades had their butts handed to them in politics year after year after year. A lot of them have this bunker mentality, and they're convinced we can't possibly win because that rationalizes all these losses they face. It rationalizes why government in Washington, even under Republican presidents in Congress, still increased massively in spending. The red pill is the realization that what is presented as fact by the corporate press is in reality a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep some very unpleasant people in power. Analogous to this is the black pill, which is it's a wrap. The trends in the West and in America are too nefarious, have been going on for too long. Even if we have some short-term victories, long term, there's no turning the ship around. And the white pill is simply hope. It is the realization that, yes, it is possible our enemies will win. It is impossible that their victory is assured. And when you tell someone that, like, you're telling me that there's no possibility of beating the Biden administration or the World Economic Forum or Klaus Schwab, and Greta Thunberg to you, it's like you're going up against her. You're like, I got nothing. She's she's a Goliath on steroids. You laugh but that's what a lot of people would want us to believe. They want us to believe that these people and the forces behind them are invincible and godlike, and that's exactly what they said about the Soviet Union, and they were proven extremely wrong.
I mean, I agree with that and like it. I also like the way that this book is kind of exquisitely balanced between describing some very dark events that occurred in the 20th century, and yet it comes out of it by saying, listen, guys, this is not just I'm not just describing an apocalypse. I'm describing an apocalypse that was averted. And it was averted against almost everybody's expectations, and this should be an encouragement to us. Let's take a pause. When we come back, let's talk some more about the basic nature of good and evil.